leading the witness. And what you're doing here basically is you're telling her the right answer in the same phrase where you're asking her a question. You're basically asking in such a way that one answer would make her look like an idiot. So it's a bit of a false choice. Example would be, say that you're screening a girl to find out how protective her friends are. You wouldn't say like, can you leave your friends and come have a drink with me? That's too obvious, that's too straightforward, and it gives her a yes or no answer that can end up not in your favor. Instead, you'd say something like, so listen, are your friends super protective? Like, are they the type where if you walked 5 feet away from them, they'd call the police because they're worried about you? Or do they realize you're an adult human being and can make decisions on your own? When you phrase the question that way, if she were to say no, it would make her seem like a total retard, all right? Another example of this is one that came up in one of my dates that I was on recently, where basically I asked the girl a question that was kind of, it put her under a lot of pressure, and she didn't know how to answer. She didn't know whether she should answer with something very like scandalous and interesting or something very like tame and boring. And so after the question, I basically told her the answer that would be the right answer, the answer that would impress me, and also interestingly enough, the answer that would lead to sex. So the question was, what is the worst thing you've ever done or the most trouble you've ever been in that you're willing to tell a guy you've known for 15 minutes? When I asked the girl this question, she sat there for a good like 15 seconds in like total terror, not knowing how to answer. Because on one hand, she was afraid of saying something too lame and boring and turning me off. On the other hand, she was afraid of saying something really slutty and being judged. So I added in afterwards, and if the answer you give is I once turned a paper in late, I'm leaving. So I told her the wrong answer is the conservative answer. The right answer is the outgoing, adventurous answer. So again, it makes her seem retarded if she says the lame one, okay? So there's this concept in game of screening a girl, qualifying a girl, and it's a very, very valuable concept. You get the girl jumping through her hoops, trying to convince you that she's cool, trying to show you that she's a good sexual partner for you, trying to show you that she's of your league, of your status. And just qualifying her and screening her is good in and of itself. But even better yet is, rather than letting the screening happen by chance, you control the screening process. You screen and tell her the right answer, or you screen and you force the answer you're looking for, the answer that leads towards her filling in the role you want, or the role that leads to sex. The next concept I want to address is something I call sneaking one past the goalie. Basically what you're doing here is you're gonna say so many things, give so much information all at once that the girl's brain can't possibly handle all of it. So one of the best ways to do this is to do what we call monologuing, which is you just give this like lengthy tirade of information that she can't respond to. A simple example of this concept would be in 2 sentences if you said, I wanna have unprotected sex with you. Now, what would happen here is most likely she'd object to the unprotected part. She'd say, no, we have to use a condom, but she let the sex slip through the cracks. Now that's such a simple example, she'd probably just object to both parts, but you get the idea. You're saying one very objectionable thing and one sort of objectionable thing, so the sort of objectionable thing gets through the filter, okay? A longer example of this might be something like, you know, I think we should take this slow. I don't want to like make the, you know, the crazy, ridiculous, unprotected, impetuous sex in a public place where I kind of disrespect you tonight. I'd rather, you know, take it slow and get to know each other and maybe cuddle in a non-sexual way where we can just enjoy each other's company and maybe stand under the starlight as I gradually pull your hair and put you up against a wall. But in any case, I don't want to do anything like that yet. I don't want anything written in blood. I just like that we like each other, and I think it's really cool that we can have this vibe and this good conversation, don't you? Now, when you say some crazy shit like that, how's the girl supposed to respond? There was so much objectionable stuff there. Would she be like, my attorney said that in paragraph A, subsection B, I should object to points 1, 2, and 3. In paragraph C, subsection 4, right? There's too much shit there she can't object. So she has to let some, or oftentimes most of it, just pass through the filter. To make this even stronger, what you can do is to phrase a lot of it in the negative. So if you say, you know, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do this, what you're doing is you're bypassing a filter in yet another way, which is the fact that the brain can't process the concept of no. Because the brain thinks in images, not in words. So when you say, we shouldn't be thinking about pulling out your hair, we shouldn't be thinking about having sex in a crazy, disrespectful way, we shouldn't be thinking about me climbing up behind you and slowly inserting myself inside of you. When you say those kind of things, she can't unimagine it. She can't imagine the non-concept, but she imagines visually the concept, and so it's in her brain whether she likes it or not. Again, you're slipping one past the goalie, you're getting through the filter, And if there's a lot of information there, she can't object to it case by case, so she has to let it through. The third and final concept I want to present to you is that of implying social status. What you're doing here is you're going to use the girl's social conditioning to actually convey a message that you're not saying. Okay, so there are certain things that are implied by society, certain things implied by a girl's blueprint, certain things implied by the way she's viewing the world that will allow you to get more out of your words than what you're actually saying. So a good example of this is a lot of times really attractive girls have dated guys who have interesting jobs. They've dated guys that are, rock stars or star athletes or like owners of like Fortune 500 companies or like CEOs of startups, that kind of stuff, where their job description is not something simple like doctor or lawyer or carpenter. And these types of guys, usually if they're asked about their job, will downplay it or avoid the question. The reason for that is twofold. Number one, their job is actually complicated to explain. Number two, they're actually used to girls gold digging them for their job or people wanting to use them for their job and not like them for genuine reasons. So they actually prefer for people to like them first. So the way that you can use this to your advantage is when you're asked about your job, you can be intentionally vague and just drop a few hints that lead towards one of these jobs that make it seem vague yet creative. And maybe even you can imply that you don't want to talk about your job because you want them to like you for you, okay? Which actually doesn't necessarily imply that your job is high status. It's just that low status people don't fucking say that. So one example might be a girl asks you your job and you say, I really don't want to talk about it. I have, interest in a few different companies, but I'd really rather we just get to know each other as people. I don't like talking about work. Something like that. That's conveying the sort of thing that a rich high status person might do. Another one that might come up is another way of saying it. Someone says, what do you do for a job? You're like, I'm unemployed. When you're clearly well-dressed, clearly put together, clearly confident. It's basically another way of saying, I refuse to qualify myself to you. And when you're at that level of refusing to qualify yourself, leaving out the blanks, you're essentially conveying that you must be high status because you don't feel any need to prove anything to anybody. So there again, you are implying status rather than stating it. And if you were to try and state it, if you were to try and brag about your job, then you would be actually overtly saying, my job isn't that cool, I'm not that confident. The key concept that makes all three of these techniques work is that in any situation, it's almost impossible for a human being to take in all the stimulus available to them. So what happens is we use shortcuts. We look at a few key indicators to derive the overall situation. And when we're doing this, we're not using our logical mammal human brain, we're using our reptile brain, and we're looking for indicators such as status, okay? So if you're behaving in the way that a high status person behaves, you will be perceived as a high status person. If there is something implied, people will latch onto that. And the funny thing and the great thing is if it's implied rather than explicitly said, when they do come to this idea, it's their own idea. It's not something you intentionally, manipulatively put in their head. It's something they created on their own, and so they trust it and they believe it. And a lot of intermediate guys, when they game, the problem is they seem very manipulative. They seem very try-hard because everything that's going on is, I want this to happen, I'm trying to make it happen, she's resisting. I want this to happen, I'm trying to make it happen, she's resisting. Advanced guys know how to use these concepts in their favor, and so the girl is making the set happen instead of them making the set happen. And when the girl has sex with them or when the girl goes home with them, the girl feels like she won. She feels like it was her idea and she seduced him. And therefore everything that happens is much, much easier.